We know who we are, and we want to help the rest of you, including Odanak, to understand our history.
What history, child? The history of French people? Like, please be for real. Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, hey boo hey, my name is Giuliana. I'm an author, genealogist, and researcher. I help everyday ordinary people become experts in their family's history, and if that's something you're interested in, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the all notifications bell button to get notified when I go live and when I upload new content. If you've been on my channel for a while now, you know that I love to go over topics such as this. Oftentimes, there are common misconceptions about the identity and the race of Indigenous Americans here in the Americas. Now, this is happening in Canada, but how the professors in academia is labeling it, they're labeling it as a epidemic that is harming United States and even Canadian sovereign nations, which I'm going to be discussing later on in this video. But I want to take a moment to really talk about how there are so many white people that are coming out and calling out other white people for pretending to be indigenous and for being pretendians. But somehow, when it's people who are darker or people who are non-white, we're not supposed to talk about it because that's supposed to be hateful towards white people. In my personal opinion, people that try to call you racist or hateful for speaking about the truth and speaking about racial issues that affect people don't really want to fix the issue at hand. They just want people to be quiet and just deal with it and just move on with their daily lives, which we are too old to be following that formula anymore. Last time I checked, we were in the age of Aquarius. We are able to research things faster, better, more accurate than ever. We have a phone to look up the things that we want to know is true or not. So again, people benefit off of our ignorance and not questioning the status quo. There is nothing hateful about telling the truth about what's happening in Indian country. And the truth is, a lot of pale people, aka white Americans, are claiming to be indigenous when they're not. This is an epidemic that has been going on for centuries now. And see, people want to act like it's black people claiming to be indigenous that's messing up for everybody. No, it's these pale people that have been able to extract resources from the government and from whatever else on the claims of them being indigenous when they're not. So let's talk about the article for a little bit before I show y'all the video of the quote unquote tribal leader speaking out against this. The beginning of the article says, and I quote, "The authenticity of Vermont's Abenaki tribes was once again rejected by a Canadian sociologist on Thursday evening at the University of Vermont. Professor Daryl LaRue said his research using an extensive Canadian genealogy database has shown the families in Vermont originally claiming to be Abenaki were clearly French Canadian. LaRue said, and I quote, "There's such obvious and compelling evidence these groups do not represent Abenaki people in any way and have no Abenaki ancestry. How did the state of Vermont recognize them as such, and why did they recognize them after writing a report saying they were not Abenaki? That's something I still don't understand," end quote. LaRue said he has met with a quote unquote couple of Vermont legislators about the issue but couldn't get answers to his questions. So let's talk about how Pretendians threaten the sovereignty of American Indian nations in the United States and in Canada, because oftentimes people would just look at this and be like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. It's not a huge issue. I mean, as long as it's the white people, right? As long as it's white people that's doing it, it's not an issue. As long as you Afrocentric Negroes don't do it, it's fine. And let's not cap, because this is what I be seeing in my comment section and how people react when this is being talked about in person and not just online. People have so much to say and feel so deeply about you melanated people claiming to be indigenous. When it's a pale person that's doing it, they have no smoke for them and they have no words. I don't care what you look like. If you're not Indigenous American, don't claim to be Indigenous American. Witnessing the battle so many melanated Aboriginal Americans gotta go through makes me sick to my stomach. But yet people like this get a pass from everyday people. And it's disgusting. Everybody can talk about Afrocentrism and how Black people are so Afrocentric and they claim everybody history and blah, 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 which may be true to a certain extent. But however, it does not give people an excuse to be hateful towards every dark-skinned person they come across who claims to be indigenous or states that they have indigenous ancestry. And this situation demonstrates how important genealogy is, and I cannot stress this enough. People try to demonize reading and looking things up on your own, but at the end of the day, if you do not do the research for yourself, you're going to continue to be brainwashed and manipulated by whatever powers at be. And if you cannot research things for yourself, you're going to continue to be bamboozled by people like this. But nevertheless, I'm going to show y'all a clip of the news channel talking about the situation and their response. So I'm going to show y'all this video and I'm going to come back with further commentary.
Leaders of the 4 Abenaki tribes within Vermont are calling for tolerance among their own.
This follows their Canadian counterparts recently saying the Vermont tribe is, quote, fake. The chiefs held a news conference yesterday after what they call negative interactions with the Abenakis of Abenaki in Canada. Representatives from Canada denounced the Vermont group as frauds during the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And this isn't the first time that they have denounced them. The panel at yesterday's news conference called these comments untrue and an attack on their history.
We are trying to understand their motives in attacking us and being cruel to our youth. We don't know why they're trying to break our historical bond as relatives, but we would like to take a dialogue with them so that we can live in peace and harmony the way it should be. We know who we are, and we want to help the rest of you, including Odanak, to understand our history.
Speakers also noted Abenaki history hasn't been taught in Vermont's school curriculum and expressed their desires for that to change.
So y'all have seen that video, and I'm just going to tell y'all guys straight up. I agree with them when it comes down to learning the history and culture of Indigenous people. Because although they are in Canada, here in the United States, we are consistently battling with lawmakers and educational institutions on teaching future generations the history of Indigenous people who was actually here prior to Columbus. This is something that has been going on for a while and is, quite frankly, a big issue. But however, they're not Abenaki. They're not Indigenous. They're descendants of French Canadians who are pretending to be Indigenous. I also want to take note that this is not the first time something like this has happened where white people have claimed to be Indigenous and got caught up for it. This is not the first time. I have made previous videos talking about pale people claiming to be from Indigenous tribes and claiming Indigenous ancestry and being exposed for it. So if you would like to watch those other videos, I made it into a playlist and you can access that playlist in the description box down below. I do strive to be unbiased with the information I share. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that I don't take things like this happening lightly, because as a researcher and genealogist, I have seen how people base their reality through historical events. And a lot of people would rather point the finger and demean you melanated Aboriginal Americans, claiming that they are fraudsters, they hate to be Black, they hate to be African, etc., etc. But when it comes to white people cosplaying as Indigenous people, it's literally crickets, and that needs to change. I also want to expand more on them saying that pretendians threaten the sovereignty of the United States and Canadian Indigenous nations, because a lot of people tend to overlook that when people especially pale people, claim to be indigenous, not only are they threatening the sovereignty of these indigenous nations, but they're pushing themselves as the authority of these nations. And we all know how people act when it comes to worshiping whiteness. A lot of people like to pretend like they don't worship whiteness or that they're not assimilated, when in reality, they're just running from themselves and they're running from the truth. So because a lot of people view white people as the standard for literally everything, they're not going to question it when they come across a white person claiming to be indigenous, when in fact that threatens the livelihood of actual indigenous American people. What many people fail to understand is that this was a plan that has been set in place for hundreds of years now. When the United States government couldn't off all the indigenous people, they put us on reservations. And when we didn't want to go on reservations, guess what? They started sending their own people into our nations, claiming to be us, trying to replace us, aka the $5 Indian. And when that didn't work, they's like, well, we just take matters in our own hands. We claim to be the real Indians, and there's nothing y'all can do about it. Eventually, what the United States government want to do is erase all obligations they have to American Indian peoples. They don't want to pay the reparations. They don't want to pay the restitutions. They don't want to share the land. They just want to get everything and be on their merry way. So when people say, oh, well, why would the government condone this? Why would pale people do this? What were they getting out of it? Resources, the opportunity to replace us and put themselves as the standard, which is quite clear and obvious, I might add. And I also want to add this too, because anytime when I talk about these topics, people always want to push the narrative that I hate white people and that white people are just so horrible and all this other stuff. Listen, if you feel like I'm being that way, then that's a personal problem. These are real life issues that affect everyday real people. And if you are too dense to understand that, then that's not my problem. Too many times people talk to you melanated Aboriginal American people crazy. They view us beneath them. There are even other you melanated Americans that feel the same way, like a lot of racists do about you melanated American people. So I don't want to hear anything about me being hateful when people can make 1,000 jokes about Black women stinking and Black women being single moms and so on and so forth. But when I talk about issues that are affecting our communities, then it's, oh, you're being hateful towards white people. No. How about I'm taking a stance for what's right, and maybe you should do the same instead of acting like a little biatch. I'm not obligated to coddle anybody's feelings. The only thing I feel obligated to do is just share the truth with people so people can better understand the world that they're living in. People need to understand that researching is important, and researching their family's ancestry is just as important. Or otherwise, we're going to continue to see things like this with no end resolve. And before I go, I want to tell y'all guys some actionable steps you can take to confirm indigenous ancestry if you suspect you have any. Step number 1, you're going to write down the birthdays, the death dates, the birthplaces, the death places, the names of your siblings, your parents, and their siblings, okay? Once you do that, then you're going to go on a ancestry database like ancestry.com and plug in the information you have. And then you're going to come across documents that may relate to the people in your tree. And it's up to you to verify that. And how do you verify that? You look at documents that match up with the information you have. Does the document have the same birthday? Does it have the same death date, birthplace, whatever? And, don't focus too much on that, because not all documents are 100% correct. And sometimes the names are misspelled. Even sometimes they may put down the wrong sex of an ancestor too. So take it seriously. But if you just come across some things that are spelled wrong, don't make it into like a big thing. Okay. Number 3, if you do come across documentation of an ancestor being indigenous, call the tribe genealogist and confirm the information that you have. You call up the tribe's genealogist and you tell them the information that you have, and they're either going to confirm or deny that your ancestor is from this nation or not. And let me tell y'all something. If you want to enroll in this nation, you are going to have to do this step. You cannot skip this step. But nonetheless, that's all the steps you got to do. Easy as 1, 2, 3, ABC. But it may not be easy. It may be very hard. So just be prepared for the challenges that come with it. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this topic, you guys. I love y'all. Please stay safe. And remember, it's not about hate. It's about setting the record straight. All right, I'm out.